Most scoping reviews are rejected not because the topic is weak, but because the wrong method was used and it's obvious within minutes. After reviewing hundreds of manuscripts and theses, I see these mistakes all the time. In this video, I will show you exactly when to use a scoping review and how to do it step by step. And at the end, I will share a detailed step-by-step guide you can keep next to you and follow to complete your own scoping review. Scoping review is used to map the existing literature in a field. So the aim is not to answer a narrow question. Instead, we try to understand what has been studied, how it has been studied, and where the gaps are. So put it simply, systematic review goes deep, scoping reviews goes wide. I will break this down into 8 simple steps, and step 6 is where most researchers go wrong. Step 1. Define your objective and research question. Your question must be broad. The problem is many researchers define narrow and hypothesis-driven questions. Such questions are suitable for a systematic literature review. For example, the objective of scoping review could be to map the existing literature on AI in healthcare, including types of application, research methods, and clinical domains. As you can see, the objective is not around, for example, testing a relationship. Instead, it's mapping the whole field. This step defines everything that follows. So this is really important. Step 2. Develop your search strategy. Now you define your keywords, synonyms, and use Boolean operators to find what you need for your review. For example, for this topic, your query can be something that you can see here on the screen. 2 blocks have been used to represent the terms for AI and healthcare, and the synonyms within each block are linked using OR, and the 2 blocks are combined using AND to retrieve records that contain terms from both blocks. OR expands your search and AND narrows the scope. So using these combinations, you are balancing coverage and relevance. And this is where many researchers go wrong. If your search strategy is weak, your entire review becomes incomplete and your paper gets rejected. Step 3. Identify sources of evidence. Now you define where you execute your search query. For example, depending on the field of your study, you may use different databases such as Scopus, Web of Science, PubMed, IEEE, or others. And if you miss important sources here, your review is incomplete, no matter how well you write it. In scoping reviews, you can also include reports, policy documents, and conference papers. For example, a scoping review on our topic on AI in healthcare, you might include WHO reports, government policy documents, and even technical white papers too. This is because you are capturing the full landscape, not just journal articles. Step 4. Define eligibility criteria. You define inclusion and exclusion criteria, but in scoping review, you are more flexible than systematic literature review. For example, you can define your inclusion criteria as studies from 2010 onwards, English language publications, and studies relevant to healthcare applications of AI. And you may exclude, for example, purely technical AI papers with no healthcare relevance. These decisions depend on your research objective, but they must be clearly defined and stated in advance. Otherwise, your review would be subjective. Step 5. Conduct search and screening. Now you perform the search and screen the studies at 2 stages. First, screen title and abstracts of the records, then screen their full text to ensure they meet your inclusion and exclusion criteria. The best practice is using 2 independent reviewers for this step. This improves reliability and reduces the bias of your review. But here is something very important. You must document everything. For example, ensure you have carefully recorded search terms used, date of search, number of records found, how many excluded at each step, and any other details. A scoping review must be replicable, so you need to provide all details so that if anyone later wants to replicate your study, by following your process, they can get the same results. This is where many struggle, and you are not alone in this. Step 6. Data charting. Now, this is where many researchers get confused because it looks very similar to a systematic review, but it is not the same. First 5 steps are useless if you don't do this step properly. In a systematic review, you focus on a specific object and you do the data extraction precisely to achieve that. For example, in a systematic literature review, you may extract things like effect sizes, outcomes, and statistical findings of testing a specific hypothesis or model. But in a scoping review, you are not answering a precise question. You are trying to understand the field. So instead of data extraction, we call this step data charting. Here is the key difference. In a systematic literature review, you compare and contrast results. But in a scoping review, you map the literature. Now let me show you how this looks like in practice. You create an Excel file. Each row represents one study, and columns are for recording the characteristics of the studies, such as, for example, author and year, study type, research area, methodology, key themes, application domains, and so on. So you are not asking what is the results of testing a relationship. You are asking, what does this study represent in the field? For example, for your topic on AI in healthcare, in a systematic review, you would ask, does AI improve diagnosis accuracy? And you would extract the results of hypothesis testing and compare them. But in a scoping review, you would ask what research exists on AI in healthcare. And you would report types of AI applications, areas of use, such as, for example, treatment or diagnosis, and methods used and populations of the studies. So instead of reading papers randomly, here we are building a structured map of the field. Here is what top researchers do differently. They don't just summarize studies. They structure the field in a way that others can build on. They show, for example, clusters of research, dominant themes, and unexpected areas. And this is what makes scoping review valuable. Step 7. Synthesizing result and identifying gaps. Now you analyze everything you have collected. You look for patterns, similarities, and differences. For example, you may find most studies focus on diagnosis and very few focus on patient experience. And this leads to your most important question. What is missing? And this is exactly your research contribution. Step 8. Reporting your review. Now you write your review. You structure your paper as introduction, methods, results, and discussion, and you present your process using a flow diagram. In your diagram, report number of studies identified, screened, and included. This is like systematic literature review, but adapted for scoping review. To make this easier, I posted a link to a reporting guide that you can literally keep next to you while you are reporting your scoping review. You just need to follow the guide step by step. It will help you understand what to report in each section and how to structure your review in a clear, systematic, and publishable way. So that's the full process of conducting a scoping review. If your work is getting rejected, it may not be your topic. It may be your method, especially in scoping review. And now you know how to fix that. And if this video helped you, let me know in the comments and tell me what you want next.